The Final Dreams of a Filly. Chapter 3. The funeral was a modest affair. The town gathered up a collection of and the mortician was even kind enough to donate a simple black coffin for the sake of holding her. It almost didn't seem real as Gulu stared down into the open casket, examining the tiny bundle within. They had done a good job, she admitted. She still only looked asleep, a small smile permanently hovering on her face from her final dream. Skulu turned away and cast her gaze to the sky, a sigh causing her to shudder. The weather team hadn't been able to clear the skies. Why, she did not know. But the day was somber. In its muted gray sky, the occasional rumble with the softest rumbles of thunder. "It's time, Scootaloo. We should take our places." It was the man who spoke, beckoning the filly away from the casket to stand beside it instead. She had positioned them to watch the approaching procession of friends and loved ones. The heavily trod towards the filly's final resting place. Poncy and Applebloom and Sweetabelle, accompanied by their sisters and their friends. Scootaloo turned to look up at the mare. "You never did answer me in the clubhouse. What happens now? Is this it?" The mare didn't speak for a moment, but instead gestured to the procession, explaining, "When a life is lost before its time, and while it's still innocent of crime, judgment cannot be passed. There was never enough time to decide who you would have grown up to be, or the choices you would have made. And death does not believe in punishing the innocent." She lowered her gaze to meet the filly's and smiled sadly. "Your life wasn't without purpose, though. You lived and touched ponies' lives through simply being there. Time did not stand to wait for the pair." As the mare spoke, ponies came and went. Each had their own words, but only a precious few being heard. As Applebloom approached the coffin, the mare paused in her explanation. Applejack stood beside her younger sister, gently pulled her close, doing her best to offer comfort. That would never be enough to fill the hurt. The little filly spoke with a seriousness that Skulu had never heard before her friend take upon any matter before, even her own heart's desire in obtaining her cutie mark. You were never supposed to die, Skulu. You were my best friend, and you were like another sister to me. We were gonna grow up together, find our special talents, and now I don't know if I can without you. I miss you, and I love you. So even if I can't find my special talent, I'll keep looking for yours. You are so special. I hope if you can hear me that you know I admired you. I'm sorry about the argument, so please forgive me, 'cause I... Then the tears took her again, and she was led away by her sister to piece back together a broken heart. As Applebloom was led away from the coffin, Skulu felt her composure beginning to slip. She bit down hard on her lip, and willed herself to keep what little she had together. The mare nursed the village struggling to handle the scene. It allowed her to compose herself again. Before continuing her explanation, "What happens now? Is this your death, much like life? Is what you decide it is? Your choice. Make what happens now. Yours to decide what your heaven will be, but please," her voice faltered as she lowered her head, as though weighing down by the sorrows of the world. "Once you've chosen, you can never go back. Heaven can change, but you have to do it on your own. I can only help you this first time. So please, make your decision wisely. It was by the time that Sweetie Belle and Rarity had approached, the young filly looked up with a lost sort of headache. Unsure of what to do, Rarity only stroked back her sister's mane and turned to reach into a saddlebag that she had brought to the procession. From within she pulled out a garment designed for a young man. It was a long, flowing cape, lined with the shimmering gold of Celestia's sun. The vest was comprised of a rich, heavy scarlet velvet. The middle was a much more intricate design, three mares of all creeds joining in the corner. In the center, the Earth Pony and the Unicorn were mere silhouettes, but between them they held the magnificent wings of a Pegasus. Carefully she draped it over the coffin, and nodded to Sweetie Belle. Soft at first, the little filly began in a low, trembling tone, but as she closed her eyes and turned her head to the heavens, her voice grew louder and louder as she sang. I have not wings to follow you, I know not where you go. I cannot fly to heaven far, to ever let you know. But your wings were made for angels, irreplaceable in their worth. So goddesses have now taken an angel back from earth. The song dissolved in bitter tears, and as the former had, she was led away to recover in the company of her only surviving friend. It's it's not fair. She Oh dang, lost my place. Okay. It's not fair, she choked furiously at herself, collapsing back into grief her own death again. She scrubbed at her eyes and cursed herself before taking a deep breath, forcing herself to calm back down. Even after touching wards, she felt at a loss. Did they not understand? You are the you are the best friend a girl could have. Sweetie Belle is more of an angel than I am. Apple Bloom is just trying to be strong for her. It it isn't fair. The crowd slowly dispersed as hours ticked by. Skulu watched as many of the adults she had known spoke in low, soft tones of their regret and sorrow. She, she watched as some laid down gifts and letters to a filly that most of them had never known. Was it guilt that drove them to do this? She didn't know. She only watched as familiar and unfamiliar alike gathered to say their goodbyes, and then she was all alone. Skulu could feel a dull ache in her chest as she sat there waiting out on out of many faces. There had been one missing. I I guess I wasn't really important to her. She began looking up at the mare, who moved to sit beside her, offering what she had to give, if only an ear to listen. Skulu continued as she looked up at the sky. I wanted to grow up to be just like her. She was the most amazing flyer in all of Equestria. She can break the sound barrier. She can move the world if she wanted to. But she didn't. A creak of protest interrupted her. The origin came from a rusted hinge at the funeral's gate, and two figures seemed to move at the edge of the haze that had begun to shroud the gravesite. They seemed to speak to each other for a few minutes. One turned away, one turned away, only to be shoved by the other, gently but firm in its resolution. As one assured her companion nearer, the voices began to materialize. I can't. Oh, Celestia, please, I can't do this. Yes, you can. I know this is hard, and it's going to be hard for a little while longer. But if you don't do this, then you never get another chance. Please. The silhouettes began to become clearer outlines, and Skulu's eyes widened as finally they stepped into visibility and approached the coffin. Hey, kiddo. It's me. I just... Oh, Scootaloo, I'm so sorry. The mare choked and cried of anguish, ripping itself from her heaving chest. Tears blinded her as she bowed her head and rested against the coffin. So sorry. If I had known, I should have. I'm so stupid, Scoots. I should have seen what was going on. You were the first filly to believe in me. You looked up to me. You depended on me. And I was so blind. It should have been me, she cried, beating the earth below her with her front hoof. It should have been me. So sorry. I loved you, Skulu. I never told you that. I don't have to be this way. And it didn't have to be this way. And it's all my fault. I'm sorry. Please forgive me, Scootaloo. It was then Fluttershy tucked a wing around her friend and held her close, disturbing in its way. Scootaloo could not find words for what she saw before her. The strongest flyer in Equestria now bowed before her, broken and unconsolable, but even her closest friend. She had never seen Rainbow cry before. She had never even known if the confident mare was capable of allowing herself that relief. That didn't matter to her anymore. Scootaloo had mattered. Now it was too late. And at the same time, Scootaloo couldn't bring herself to anger. She had been angry at times, yes. Why had no one ever looked for her? Why had her parents failed to take care of her? Why had Rainbow never once asked if everything was okay with her home life, or known that that or known there had never been a home for her to go back to? In life, those things made her angry. Now they only made a deep sigh well within her. As she wished she could tell Rainbow her true feelings. She had never blamed any of them for what had happened, and she never would. They never needed to ask for forgiveness, because they were never blamed. But how could they know? How could they hear a voice come from a mouth that would never move again? Fluttershy did her best to console Rainbow for the time that passed so slowly. Finally, after a moment in eternity lasted what seemed forever, Rainbow got up. The mare silently pulled out something she had tucked beneath her wing, placing it on the coffin, and whispered a final goodbye before turning to leave with Fluttershy at her side. Once they had finally gone, Scootaloo brought herself to look at it. It wasn't a second longer before she could look at it anymore, and turned away. The crown of Equestria's best young flyers had been placed over the cape Rarity had left behind. It had been Rainbow's pride and joy. It had been her happiness and inspiration. Now it was only a memory they would never share. Now it was only a memory that they would never share, and a broken dream. She would never get to see her fly, so there was no reason to wait for the next best flyer, her flyer, that had gone to soar. As they reached the gate to the funeral, Rainbow stopped one last time to cast a glance back at what could have been. She couldn't see Skulu staring back at her, nor could she see anything more than the tears that blinded her. Now truly alone, that air was silent. The filly and the mare sat together there for a long time, that filly staring off into nothingness that stretched endlessly before her. There was endless possibilities now to fill the void of all that she would never grow up to realize. The destination of heaven now loomed to replace the journey of life to reach it. There was no hurry to get there. She had all the time in the world now. Mare knew this just as well as she did not move to disturb the filly's thoughts. Days passed in the course of those thoughts. Skulu uttered not a word. She sat there perfectly still, staring sadly into forever, and merely stared back. Tears would occasionally brim and flow down her features, but even those were wan and ended as the time passed. Finally, the first morning of winter, she spoke. I've decided. I mean, I've decided. The words came from absolute silence. The mare started at the sudden resolution in such a young filly's voice. But listen to her, what she had deemed worthy of heaven. For thousands of years she had heard and seen many different heavens. Sometimes the heaven would be of one who chose to become a god and rule forever on their own domain. Sometimes the heaven would be a fantasy they had never gotten to fulfill. And sometimes it would simply to be never want or need it for anything again. Simply join their loved ones to when their time came, living in paradise for all eternity. Skulu continued, pushing herself up and bracing for whatever was going to come next. I know what I want, so now what? Well, the mare found it odd she did not simply speak it, let it be. She nodded and turned to stare into forever once more. Will it to be, but be sure, there isn't any going back after this. Do you understand, Skulu? Skulu only nodded and closed her eyes. This was her heaven. This was her final wish.